I stepped through the revolving brass doors of the Halycon, and the hushed atmosphere of Century City's most exclusive restaurant settled over me like $1,000 cashmere wrap. The sound of the bustling street outside vanished, replaced by the low murmur of conversation and the distant clink of silver on porcelain. Crystal chandeliers dripped from coffered ceilings, scattering light across mahogany tables set with impossibly white linen. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, Lake Michigan's evening waters glittered like a spill of black diamonds. "Miss Rowan, welcome back." David Anders, the general manager, stepped forward with the practiced grace of a man who navigated the city's elite for a living. He was distinguished, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled. "Your private dining room is ready." I nodded, the scent of lilies and old money filling my lungs. "Thank you, David." Behind me, my family faltered. My father, Henry, stopped mid-stride, his eyebrows rising toward his receding hairline. "Penelope?" Dad's voice was laced with that familiar, gentle bewilderment. At 61, his eyes still held the sharp intelligence that had built his modest accounting practice, but now they were clouded with confusion. They know you here?" Before I could answer, my mother, Eleanor, exchanged a nervous glance with my older sister. Mom's hand went to her pearl necklace, a 35th anniversary gift from Dad. She twisted it, a lifelong tell. "Must be a mix-up, Madeline," she whispered. Madeline, however, wasn't whispering. At 33, she had perfected the art of the stage-whispered takedown. As a communications director for a mid-sized marketing firm, she wore her title like a suit of armor. Tonight, that armor was a razor-sharp designer dress that likely cost what my family believed was 2 months of my rent. "She probably called ahead and pretended to be a regular," Madeline murmured to her husband Caleb. "Anything for the show." Dominic, my 25-year-old brother, just scanned the room with the cold, analytical precision of his fresh MBA. "This place must clear 8 figures annually," he muttered, calculating the cost of the imported marble floors. Caleb, ever Madeline's echo, checked his watch. "Well, let's get this over with. I'm starving." "Right this way, Miss Rowan," David continued, either oblivious to, or, more likely, professionally ignoring the chaotic mess of my family's reactions. He led us through the main dining area, past tables of Century City's old guard, men and women sipping wines that cost more than my car, or at least the car my family thought I drove. We reached a heavy oak door in a private alcove. A small, polished gold plaque beside it read, "The Rowan Family." My father stopped breathing for a second. He turned to me, his mouth open, but no words came out. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said quietly. "If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you." Inside, the table gleamed under a private chandelier, each place setting arranged with military precision. A bouquet of my father's favorite white lilies, the ones my mother always said were too extravagant, filled the air. As we settled into the plush, high-backed chairs, the conversation I had been anticipating all week began to unravel. "Penelope, honey," Mom started, her tone the same one she used when I was in college and she found out I'd skipped a class. It's very sweet, but is it sensible? Places like this are so expensive." "She's right, Penny," Madeline jumped in, leaning toward me conspiratorially. "I have a client connection at Gaston. I could have gotten us a 30% discount." "You really should have asked me first." I took a slow sip of sparkling water, the ice clinking softly. This was the same song, different verse. For years, I had deflected. Last Christmas, Dominic had gifted me a book on monetizing your hobby, with a chapter on moving from freelance to a stable, full-time career highlighted in yellow. Madeline routinely offered to connect me with real clients, despite never once asking about the ones I already had. "My apartment is closer to here than you'd think," I said, offering a non-answer. My one-bedroom in Edgewater wasn't chosen for its budget price, but for its strategic proximity to my company's primary logistics hub. The deliberate misdirection felt both necessary and exhausting. "Still in that tiny place in Edgewater?" Mom asked, her brow furrowed with genuine, misguided concern. "You know, there are some lovely affordable condos opening up in Wicker Park. Your sister was just saying—" "Mom, I doubt she can afford Wicker Park on what she makes," Madeline cut in, her smile tight. "Let's be realistic." The sommelier, a man who looked like he'd been born in a tuxedo, approached with a leather-bound wine list that looked heavier than a dictionary. He presented it, his gaze automatically going to my father, then shifting to me as the host. Madeline's hand shot out, snatching it. "I'll handle this," she announced, her voice dripping with the confidence of someone accustomed to taking charge. "We don't want to accidentally order something ridiculous." She scanned the pages, her eyes widening slightly. "My God. Okay, let's just get the house." I gently slid my hand forward, taking the menu from her grasp. Her perfectly manicured fingers tightened for a second before she let go, her expression one of pure shock. "I've got this covered tonight, Maddie," I said, using the childhood nickname I knew she hated. I scanned the familiar pages, then looked up at the sommelier. "We'll have the Chablis Grand Cru 2018, please." Madeline's jaw dropped. "Penny, that's a $300 bottle of wine." "It's Dad's birthday," I replied, meeting her gaze steadily. "Nothing but the best." Dad reached over and squeezed my hand, a flicker of genuine emotion crossing his face. For a moment, I saw something new there, not just fatherly affection, but a glimmer of pride. The moment was ruined when Theodore, our server, placed the elegant, embossed menus before us. Dominic flipped his open and audibly choked. $500 per person, he hissed, his eyes wide as they darted to me. "Penny, this is a prefix menu. That's $4,000, just for the food." Caleb leaned into Madeline, whispering something that made her glance at me with renewed, undisguised suspicion. "She has to be in debt," she whispered back, not quite softly enough. This is a cry for help. I watched their reactions, the familiar push and pull of our family dynamic shifting under the bright chandelier. Madeline, the self-appointed successful one. Dominic, the competitive analyst, recalculating my worth. Mom and Dad exchanged worried glances, clearly out of their depth. "Tonight is about Dad," I said firmly, my voice cutting through their whispers. "Let's just enjoy it." But as the first course arrived on hand-painted porcelain, I wondered if that was entirely true. 10 minutes later, I excused myself from the table, my smile firmly in place. "I need to double-check with the chef about Dad's seafood allergy," I explained to my family. "I'll be right back." Theodore, our server, nodded respectfully. "Of course, Miss Rowan. I'll show you." He led me toward the kitchen, but as we rounded the corner into a service hallway, his pager buzzed. "Excuse me, Miss Rowan. The sommelier needs me." "Just continue down this hall. Chef Matthias is expecting you." He hurried off. I paused to check a text from my office manager about a last-minute logistics snag for the Unity Health Gala. As I slipped my phone back into my clutch, voices drifted from the private dining room. The heavy door was cracked just slightly ajar. "What is she trying to prove?" Madeline's voice, sharp with judgment. "This place is ridiculous. She's putting on a show, and it's just sad. She probably maxed out every credit card she has for this," Caleb's baritone added, always ready to reinforce his wife's opinions. "This is going to bankrupt her. She lives in that dive in Edgewater, for God's sake." "I don't know." Dominic's voice cut through. "Did you see the way the manager knew her? Maybe she's dating him." A short, cruel laugh from Caleb. "That's it. It's the only way this makes sense. She's sleeping with the manager for a free meal." My chest tightened. Each word was a needle, pricking the carefully maintained composure I'd worn for years. I'd heard variations of these comments my whole adult life, but tonight, hearing them through a crack in a door, they landed differently, harder, clearer. "She's always been thoughtful," Dad said, his voice quiet but firm. "Just let her do this." Thoughtful or not, Henry, this is financial suicide, Madeline snapped back. I'm the one who's going to have to bail her out when her landlord comes calling. Again. I closed my eyes, drawing a slow, shaky breath through my nose. The air tasted of saffron and truffle from the kitchen behind me. This night wasn't about their approval. It was about Dad. I straightened my spine, smoothed the expression from my face, and pushed the door open. I walked back into the dining room with a smile that betrayed nothing. All set, I announced, settling into my chair. Chef is preparing something special for Dad's main course. Madeline leaned forward, her voice honeyed with that false concern she'd perfected. Penny, really, is this in your budget? We could just go somewhere else. Somewhere more appropriate. There's no shame in it. Yeah, Caleb nodded, gesturing around the room. We don't need all this fancy stuff. Henry's fine with his usual steakhouse. This is just a lot. Their tag team approach was nothing new. For years, they'd worked in tandem. Madeline would launch the initial critique, and Caleb would follow with the reinforcement. They'd always seen me as the family failure, the creative one, the flaky one, the one who needed real-world advice. The server arrived with the first course, butter-poached lobster. Each plate was a work of art. Dad took his first bite, his eyes closing in appreciation. Penelope. This is incredible. Despite her words, Madeline didn't hesitate before digging in, her expression betraying her enjoyment even as she prepared her next critique. I make 6 figures, she said between bites, speaking to the table at large, and I would never waste money like this. It's just not smart. I remained quiet, focusing on Dad. The dinner progressed in a surreal bubble of luxury and judgment. With each course, the staff's attention toward me grew more pronounced, and my family's suspicion deepened. Miss Rowan, is the temperature to your liking? Theodore would ask, appearing at my elbow. Miss Rowan, Chef Matthias has sent out a complimentary amuse-bouche for your table. Miss Rowan, would you like us to decant the second bottle? My family watched these interactions like a tennis match. Mom looked confused. Dad seemed proud but still bewildered. Madeline and Caleb exchanged glances that clearly confirmed their dating the manager theory. You know, Penny, Dominic said, swirling his $300 wine in his glass with an air of expertise. If you're trying to build your client base for your party planning, you should really focus on corporate, better stability. These one-off charity gigs you do, they're never going to pay the bills. That's great advice, Dom, I said, sipping my wine. I'm serious, he pressed, his MBA radiating from him. You need to think about scale, profit margins. I could look at your books if you want, see where you're leaking cash. Leaking cash is her specialty, apparently, Caleb muttered to Madeline, who smothered a laugh behind her napkin. It must be nice, Madeline said, to just blow money on desserts when you should be saving for a real place or a 401k. I met her gaze across the table. The familiar sting of her judgment was gone, replaced by a cold, clear certainty. The decision crystallized in my mind. It was time. They deserved to know. I deserved to be seen. Just then, Chef Matthias himself emerged from the kitchen, his white coat pristine. He made a beeline for our table. Miss Rowan, a pleasure to see you again, he said, beaming. I wanted to personally confirm that we've prepared your father's dessert without any trace of seafood cross-contamination, as requested. Thank you, Chef Matthias. I appreciate your personal attention to detail, I said warmly. As the chef returned to the kitchen, I saw Mom watching, her head tilted, a new awareness dawning in her eyes. She was finally starting to sense that the story they'd written for me was wrong. The desserts arrived, a molten chocolate souffle that made Dad's eyes widen, and a custom vanilla bean and salted caramel layer cake. In delicate gold leaf it read, Happy 61st Henry. This is the most thoughtful birthday I've ever had, Penelope, Dad said, his voice thick as he reached for my hand. The warmth of his words was almost enough to overshadow Madeline's final jab. Well, let's see how thoughtful she is when the bill comes. The leather portfolio arrived with the quiet gravity of a judge's verdict. Theodore placed it precisely between my father and me, a silent acknowledgement of the table's tension. Madeline's hand darted out, snatching it before anyone else could move. "I'll put this on my corporate card. We can all just Venmo Maddie," she announced, her voice booming with authority. "Penelope, you can just cover the tip, if that's not too much." "Good plan," Dylan smirks, sliding his water glass between his palms. Caleb leaned back, his voice deliberately loud. "Maybe we should start a collection for Penny's budget." "What's the going rate for freelance party planning these days? Enough for a decent tip?" The tension crackled. Diners at nearby tables glanced over, their expressions a mixture of discomfort and fascination. "Actually," I said, my voice calm despite the heat rising in my chest, "I've got this covered." I reached into my purse and withdrew my wallet. The black metal card felt cool against my fingertips. I placed it on the table. The matte black American Express Centurion card didn't shine. It absorbed the light. Its titanium weight made a solid, definitive clack as it hit the linen. Silence dropped like a heavy curtain. "What is that?" Madeline asked, her voice pitched higher than normal. "Is that a fake? From the internet? Oh, Penny, that is so tacky. Those replicas look so real now." "It's quite real," I said, meeting her gaze. Theodore approached. His professional demeanor slipped for a fraction of a second when he saw the card. His posture straightened. He collected the portfolio and my card with a slight bow. "Right away, Miss Rowan." He returned 3 minutes later, his face pale. He looked horrified. "Miss Rowan," he stammered, his eyes darting to Madeline's triumphant smirk. I'm so very sorry. The card, it was declined. The air was sucked from the room." "What?" I said, my own voice barely a whisper. "That was impossible." The issuer cited insufficient funds," Theodore whispered, looking like he was about to be physically ill. The family exploded. It wasn't loud, but it was brutal. Dominic let out a sharp, barking laugh. Caleb covered his face, but his shoulders were shaking. Madeline leaned forward, her face a mask of pity so cruel it was masterful. "Oh, Penny," she breathed, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Oh, honey, I knew it. How absolutely mortifying for you. It's okay. We'll handle it. Just stop this, okay?" "The show is over." She triumphantly pulled her own platinum card from her wallet and held it out to Theodore. "Here, run this, and please, just bring us the check." My blood ran cold. This wasn't possible. I felt the heat rising in my face. This was my moment of proof, and it had just blown up in my face, making me look like the exact fool they all thought I was. I was speechless, humiliated, and utterly, completely stunned. Theodore stood frozen, his hand halfway toward Madeline's card, his eyes fixed on me in terror. "That will not be necessary." The voice cut through the humiliation, calm and authoritative. David Anders, the general manager, was standing at the entrance to our private room. He strode in, his face a mask of controlled fury. He didn't look at my family. He looked at Theodore. "Theodore, you will not be taking that card," he said, his voice low. Madeline froze, her card still in the air. "David?" she said, her own voice suddenly uncertain. "David Anders? Is that you? From the Chamber of Commerce luncheons?" David glanced at her, a flicker of recognition passing over his face, but he dismissed her instantly. "Mrs. Rowan, a moment." He turned to me, and his entire demeanor softened, shifting into one of profound, almost reverent respect. "Miss Rowan, my deepest apologies," he said, his voice projecting for the entire room to hear. "I have just been alerted by our front of house. Our new system, you see, is not configured to process a transaction of this scale without a manual voice authorization. It was not declined for funds." He shot a killing glance at Theodore, who looked like he might faint. "It was flagged for its size." He turned to my stunned family. "I am David Anders, and I should have recognized Miss Rowan the moment she walked in. My apologies, miss." You know her?" Dad stammered. Know her? David let out a short, respectful laugh. Mr. Rowan, your daughter's company, Rowan Signature Strategies, produced the Unity Health Gala last month. It was, without question, the finest and most complex corporate event this city has seen in a decade. We are still trying to figure out how her team handled the logistics. Madeline's face drained of all color. Caleb's jaw was on the floor. David Anders snapped his fingers. A server instantly appeared with a bottle of Dom Perignon in an ice bucket. Miss Rowan, please accept this with our compliments, and as an apology for our staff's error. He took the Centurion card from Theodore's trembling hand. I will process this myself. Theodore, you are on bar duty for the rest of the week. Yes, sir, Theodore squeaked and vanished. As David Anders left to process the payment, Dominic was frantically typing under the table. His thumbs moved in a blur. Maddie, he whispered, his voice cracking. He tilted the phone screen toward her. Maddie, look at this. Forbes. The new face of luxury logistics. Penelope Rowan. It's her. Madeline looked at the screen. Her face went from white to a sickly shade of green. Her eyes lifted from the phone to meet mine, filled with a terrifying, raw mix of disbelief, confusion, and something that looked like hurt. I took a deliberate sip of the complimentary champagne, letting its complex notes settle on my tongue. I suppose, I said, setting the glass down gently, we should talk about what I actually do for a living. The private dining room had grown so silent you could hear the faint hum of the wine fridge. My family's expressions had morphed from smug pity to stunned disbelief. Rowan Signature Strategies started in 2019, I began, my voice steady, the adrenaline of the last 5 minutes making everything sharp and clear. After 3 years of working for other event companies, I saw a gap in the corporate market. No one was delivering truly seamless, high-stakes logistical experiences. Dad leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. The confusion in his eyes was gone, replaced by an intense, focused curiosity. My first clients were small tech startups, I continued. They wanted launch parties to impress investors. I rented a small warehouse space in Edgewater, not an apartment, a warehouse. I hired 2 part-time assistants and delivered both events under budget. The apartment, Mom whispered, her hand at her pearl necklace. Your tiny apartment. Is 3 blocks from our primary logistics hub, I explained. The building is old, but the location is perfect. I'm rarely there anyway. I outlined the growth. 6 clients the first year, 15 the second. Then the turning point, landing the Crestview Healthcare Annual Leadership Summit. That put us on the map with the Fortune 500. Last year, I said, the facts flowing easily, we produced 78 events across 17 states. We've grown from those 2 part-timers to a core team of 47 full-time employees that travels nationally. Dad's expression underwent the most dramatic transformation. The bewilderment gave way to understanding, and then a profound pride bloomed across his features, softening the lines around his eyes. He sat straighter. Excellence in every detail, I said, looking directly at him. Just like you taught me, Dad. I built the entire business on that principle. The silence that followed felt heavy. Then Madeline cleared her throat, her voice tight. Why? Why didn't you ever mention this? All those times at family gatherings, we asked how work was going. You just said fine or busy. She's right, Caleb chimed in. His eyes narrowed. This is weird. It seems strange to hide this kind of success from your own family. What's your profit margin on that kind of operation? Dominic asked, his MBA brain clicking back online. You should be talking to me about tax strategies. There are S-corp structures that could optimize. We're your family, Madeline interrupted, her voice softening into something that sounded almost wounded. We deserve to know. The accusation hung in the air. The classic pivot. My silence was now the issue, not their assumptions. You're right, I said, and their collective surprise at my admission was almost comical. I do bear some responsibility. When I started, I wasn't sure it would succeed. The first 8 months, I barely broke even. I lived on instant noodles and worked 18-hour days. I didn't want to disappoint anyone if it failed. We would never, Mom started. By the time it was viable, I continued gently, something had shifted. Remember Thanksgiving 3 years ago? Recognition flickered on their faces. I mentioned landing the Northwestern Medical Conference. Dominic, you asked if I was still doing those little parties. Madeline, you suggested I apply for an entry-level coordinator position at your firm because it had actual benefits and a real future. Color rose in Madeline's cheeks. At some point, I said, keeping my voice free of accusation, it just seemed easier to let you all believe what you wanted to believe. David Anders returned, placing the new leather folio in front of me with the receipt. All set, Miss Rowan, and congratulations again on the Event Planners Association Award last month. Best Corporate Production of the Year. Quite an achievement. Thank you, David, I smiled, signing the receipt and adding a generous tip. And your team has grown so impressively. 50 employees now, correct? He added. Only 47, I corrected him automatically, a reflex, though we're adding 3 logistics positions next quarter. He nodded, impressed. My apologies. Good evening. He withdrew. The correction hung in the air, a small detail that revealed more than the grand pronouncements. What are your current projects? Dad asked, his voice gentle with this new, fragile understanding. We're handling the Art Institute's annual gala next month, I replied, warming to his genuine interest. 3 museum fundraisers, the Century City Symphony's donor event, and national conferences for Keller Williams and Abbott Laboratories. I paused, then added the final piece. This year's revenue projection is around $52 million. Henry choked on his champagne. Mom's eyes welled with tears. Business Century ran a profile last quarter, I added quietly. They estimated my personal net worth at around $33 million. Their numbers were reasonably accurate. Madeline set her glass down with exaggerated care, her hand visibly trembling. The complete, profound silence that followed was broken only by her sharp intake of breath. What struck me most was how unchanged I felt. The weight of the secret was gone, but I was still the same Penelope. My sister's perfectly maintained composure finally cracked. A single hot tear slipped down her cheek, tracing a line through her expensive foundation. I thought I was helping you, she whispered, her voice breaking. All this time, I thought I was the successful one. I thought I was trying to motivate you. Caleb stared at the menu prices with new understanding, as if recalculating years of interactions. Dominic's MBA confidence had visibly deflated. He looked small, staring into his water glass. I'm still the same person I was an hour ago, I said softly. Dad reached across the table and gripped my hand. His eyes shone. I am so proud of you, Penelope. 3 simple words. Not for the money, not for the company, but for the recognition. It was the beginning of something new. I still don't understand, Madeline said, her voice stronger now, edged with the old art of making someone else's choices about her. We could have celebrated this, as a family. Did you think we couldn't handle it? Dominic asked, his confidence returning in small increments. That we'd be, what, jealous? Do you think you're better than us now? Caleb added, his loyalty to his wife transparent. The questions landed like arrows. No, I said, finding my center. I was afraid of losing you. I wanted to be loved for who I am, not for what I have. I told them about my college roommate, Bethany, who was my best friend until I landed a big contract. After that, she'd introduce me as my entrepreneur roommate, not just my friend. By senior year, she was asking me to invest in her boyfriend's app. I told them about a client, Marcus Wheeler, who treated me as an equal for weeks. until his assistant accidentally copied me on an email where he called me the 30 million event planner and told his team to give her whatever she wants. The next morning, he couldn't look me in the eye. He just agreed with everything I said. I set my glass down. I didn't want that to happen with us. But it already had, I said, my voice quiet but clear, just in reverse. I looked around the table, meeting each pair of eyes. Do you remember last Christmas? When I mentioned expanding into the corporate retreat market, Madeline, you called it my little hobby and asked if I'd considered going back to school for a real degree. Her cheeks flushed. And Thanksgiving before that, I turned to my brother. Dominic, you offered to send me job listings from your alumni network. You said it was time I found something with stability. He studied the tablecloth, tracing the edge of his napkin. When I moved to Edgewater, I looked at my brother-in-law. Caleb, you joked that I couldn't afford a real Century City address, and at Dad's birthday last year, you asked if I needed help with my student loans. Each example landed with quiet, undeniable impact. I wasn't accusing. I was simply reflecting their own words back to them, now cast in the harsh, bright light of the truth. The apartment jokes, the career advice books, the offers to connect me with real businesses, I said. You all decided who I was, the struggling, creative, slightly flaky little sister. You decided I needed your help. You never once stopped to ask me if I was okay. You never asked what I was really building. The weight of recognition settled over them, not of my success, but of their assumptions. My mother broke the silence first, her voice thick with emotion as tears spilled onto her cheeks. Oh, Penelope, we failed you. We completely failed you. Dad reached for her hand, then looked at me. We never really asked, did we? Not properly. To my absolute shock, Madeline's eyes were wet, but these tears were different. I think I was jealous, she admitted, her voice cracking. I was jealous of how free you seemed. While I was climbing the corporate ladder and stressing about promotions, you just seemed unconcerned with status, with what people thought. Now I understand why. She wiped at a tear. You didn't care, because you'd already won. I'm not jealous anymore, Penny. I'm so proud it hurts. Dominic cleared his throat. I never gave you the respect you deserved. I assumed success had to look like my path, my degree, my job. I never considered you were already miles ahead. We all played our parts in this, I said, feeling the family dynamic, which had been broken for years, finally shift and resettle like sand after a wave. I could have been more forthcoming, but I needed to know. I had to know you saw me, and not my bank account. Well, I see you now, Dad said, raising his glass, his hand shaking slightly. To Penelope. To Palmer, Mom echoed, her voice thick. To Penny, Madeline whispered, and for the first time in our adult lives, her smile was completely, painfully, beautifully genuine. A month later, I stood near the bar of a renovated 1920s theater, a champagne flute in my hand. My professional team moved with flawless precision, executing my parents' 36th anniversary celebration. The historic venue glowed in amber light, catching the crystal and silver on tables for just 30 of their closest friends. Mom looked radiant, her hand in Dad's as they greeted their guests. The event was intimate, but the experience rivaled the galas I produced for governors. That's Penelope Rowan, I overheard one of the venue's waiters telling a new hire, his voice hushed. She produces the top events in the city. A month ago, those words would have made me scan the room for my family, ready to deflect. Tonight, I just smiled. Madeline approached, carrying 2 dessert plates. Tried the chocolate lava thing yet? It's insane. She handed me one. They look happy. They do, I said. She had spent the afternoon arranging place cards, a task she once would have considered beneath her. Across the room, Dominic was deep in conversation with my operations manager, his notebook open, asking respectful questions about supply chain strategy. I've been journaling, I told Madeline, surprising myself, writing about how hiding my success was its own form of control. By managing what you all knew, I was trying to control how you'd treat me. But authenticity, I said, requires honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. Being seen fully is terrifying, but it's liberating. The weight was gone. No more separate selves, no more calculated omissions. I noticed a young woman from the catering staff watching me. She was maybe 23, with the hyper-vigilant eyes of someone talented who doesn't believe in herself yet. I'd seen her quietly solve 2 problems tonight before they ever became visible. "Excuse me," I said to Maddie. I crossed to the young woman. "The timing on the dessert service was perfect. That was your call, wasn't it?" She blushed. "Just doing my job, Miss Rowan." "I recognize that look," I said quietly. "Hiding your accomplishments won't protect you. Your worth isn't in what you do, but living authentically is the only way to be free." Something shifted in her expression. Recognition. I handed her my card. "Call me on Monday. I could use someone with your instincts on my team." Later, Dad tapped his glass for attention. He asked me to join him and Mom. "Our Penelope has made this night extraordinary," he said, his voice thick. "But her greatest gift wasn't this beautiful party. It was finally letting us see her." I looked out at our family, our friends. "A month ago, I showed you what I do," I said. "But tonight is about who we are, together. Thank you for seeing me, all of me." Madeline gave me a real hug. "Next time you become a multi-millionaire, just warn me," she whispered. I laughed. "No need. I'm still just me." The next morning, I stood in my new downtown office overlooking the Century City skyline. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the lake. On the credenza behind my desk, family photos now stood prominently alongside my business awards. No longer separate worlds, but one whole life. My phone rang. It was Madeline, confirming Sunday dinner at her place. As I answered, I caught my reflection in the window. My smile came easy now, unguarded and real. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.